In one of the episodes of The Big Bang Theory, Bob Newhart, playing as Professor Proton, asks Leonard whether Sheldon is dangerous, to which Leonard answers, "Actually, he's a genius." Professor Proton looks at him and says, "That doesn't answer my question." I should say up front that this is a tricky subject and I'm only trying to touch the tip of the iceberg of this subject matter. I surely cannot cover all the important aspects in a 3-minute video. In his journals, Kierkegaard writes, "Since my earliest childhood, a barb of sorrow has lodged in my heart. As long as it stays, I am ironic. If it is pulled out, I shall die." It's a popular belief that many of the great artists or writers wouldn't have been able to create all the wonderful stuff that they created if it weren't for their eccentric viewpoints, the way they behaved, and in some cases, their mental disorders. Many of them suffered from depression and many from other forms of mental disorder. Perhaps the most important mental illness which might be of interest to us is manic depressive disorder. What happens in a patient is that for a period of time they go through a depressive phase which doesn't last forever, and this depression eventually alters into a manic phase. It's usually in this period that the artist comes up with tons of new ideas and a restless urge to create. My favorite example is Schumann, who wrote little music in his depressive stages which were followed by a manic stage and a rush of new compositions. Other people we could mention are Van Gogh, Stephen Fry, Beethoven, and Edvard Munch. Genetic factors should also be considered. In family members of these people, there seems to exist other individuals who suffer from one form of mental illness or another. Many family members of Hemingway committed suicide. Mahler, who is one of the gloomiest composers I know, had a brother who committed suicide. Einstein's son was diagnosed with schizophrenia. James Joyce's daughter was also schizophrenic. And in the case of Bertrand Russell, his son, aunt, granddaughter, and uncle were diagnosed with schizophrenia. What's crucial here is the way these people treated their mental disorders. Their eccentric mentality was not an obstacle to their creativity, but rather a means by which they could tint everything with their own taste and unique personality. Here I'm quoting Kierkegaard again. "What is a poet? An unhappy man who conceals profound anguish in his heart, but whose lips are so fashioned that when sighs and groans pass over them, they sound like beautiful music." For instance, Hermann Hesse wrote his masterpiece, Steppenwolf, when he was struggling with despair and was plagued by suicidal thoughts. Louis Wayne's famous artwork shows his progressive schizophrenia. Tchaikovsky's music is the sound of his profound sadness and hypersensitivity. John Nash attributed his great ideas to his abnormal way of thinking. This could be partially explained by the traits which so-called madmen and those who are considered to be genius have in common: unconventional way of thinking, rebellious acts, novel ideas, loose associations, self-confidence, and in some cases hyperactivity and decreased need for sleep. If you set the boundaries of relevance beyond what's typical, you might understand the genius of a person like Newton. Newton didn't discover gravity. Monkeys who jump from a branch to another branch know about gravity. What Newton did was asking himself whether the same thing which makes an apple fall makes the moon rotate around the earth. The same line of reasoning holds true in regards to Salvador Dali. What he simply did was connect into ideas, concepts, or things that apparently had nothing in common, and the result was something that only the genius and madness of Dali could create.